One of the craziest scenes in the movie Social Media Monster is the section about the alleged nuclear threats, the threats to quote unquote blow up Perry nuclear power plant. And so I just want to remind everybody how I learned of this. And so at the same time as the rest of the world, I was sent a copy of this scumbag.com article, which claimed that I was headed towards North Perry and I was going to blow up the nuclear power plant. So, of course, this was not true. I believe that at this point, I was already in Pennsylvania, and I was actually headed for 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant because, as I had been publicly talking about for the previous month, I was making a trip across the country visiting nuclear facilities for an investigative article that I was writing about the need for Yucca Mountain, which is a permanent nuclear storage facility located at the Nevada test site. The Nevada test site, of course, is Area 51, Area 19, Area 20, 19 and 20, where they blew up the first nuclear bombs. Yucca Mountain was a giant 5-mile-long borehole in which we were going to create a permanent storage repository for high-level transuranic waste. But activists stood up and they fought it. Democrats fought it. John Kerry had made it a point in his presidential run, and it became an environmental cause. And then, of course, eventually the project was shut down, leaving us with no permanent storage facility for spent nuclear fuel rods, which, of course, are then left in the parking lots, encased in cement, in the parking lots of these newer nuclear power plants, guarded by small-town police officers, because most of these power plants are in small towns, and basically exposing us all to the risk of virtually anybody being able to obtain a spent nuclear fuel rod. This would be a terrorist risk. This would be us, as a country, leaving these spent nuclear fuel rods all over the United States, virtually unguarded, while not having a permanent storage facility. Now, remember, the primary issue with nuclear power is that we don't have a permanent solution for storage. So as we make electric cars and we increase demand on electricity, with the devices we use, et cetera, we have to make more power plants, but we continue to create spent fuel rods, and we have no permanent storage facility to put them in. That's what Yucca Mountain was about. So this is Yucca Mountain was a very good solution to a complex problem. And I was one of the unique environmental activists that was in support of Yucca Mountain for obvious reasons. It solves a big problem. That they claim there was environmental hazards involved is ridiculous. They blew up the first nuclear bombs only 20, 30 miles away from where this Yucca Mountain tube was to begin with. So for the previous month, I had been working on this article. I was headed east. I was going from nuclear facility to nuclear facility to nuclear facility. I went to the Hanford site, to Idaho National Laboratories, to Rocky Flats Nuclear Weapons Manufacturing Facility, to Argonne Woods, the site of CP2 and 3, Chicago Pile 2 and 3, the first running nuclear fuel reactors. I went to Dresden Generating Station. That's when, only days before, I had uncovered the existence of the Morris operation, which is the nation's only permanent storage facility at a very small scale for high-level transuranic waste and spent fuel rods. It was basically Yucca Mountain, but 1/1000th of the size. And, of course, at this time, no one had ever written about the Morris operation. No one knew it existed. I didn't even know it existed. I was standing at Dresden Generating Station, turned around and said, "What is that building?" and started doing research until I uncovered that we had this permanent, storage facility. So I was in fact working on an investigative article. I later published this article. And so what you'll note in the movie Social Media Monster very specifically is none of what I just said is in the movie. And so, of course, here's me, and I'm headed to 3 Mile Island, which was, I believe at the time, was about to be shut down. TMI-1. TMI-2 is the reactor that blew that caused the 3 Mile Island incident, and then they were shutting down TMI-1. North Perry power plant wouldn't have been a plant that I would have covered, simply because North Perry and Davis Best power plants were so widely covered by Scene Magazine and Cleveland Free Times for many, many years. They had active watchdogs on both of these plants. And so for me, that wasn't an original subject matter, and I tend to focus only on original research. So then there was never up until this moment, however, said the words North Perry Nuclear Power Plant. The last time I even drove up the road where North Perry Village was on, I believe may have been in 2009 when I was on a trip to Cape Cod with my girlfriend. And so and honestly, I didn't even know where when I read this article about this nuclear threat that I had allegedly made, I actually had to, I had to sit there and Google where where this power plant was, because I didn't even know where I was being accused of heading towards. But the moment that article was published, I immediately placed a call to North Perry Village. Once I learned where the power plant was, once I figured out, what the name of the police agency that was in the town, I called the lady on the phone and I said, hey, I just want to let you guys know, I got the dispatcher, I want to let you know that this article was just published. And I'm in Pennsylvania right now. I'm not headed towards North Perry. I'm actually on 80 West. I'm headed towards 3 Mile Island. And so I told them what I was working on. I said, I'm working on an investigative article about Yucca Mountain and the closure of these nuclear power plants, etc. TMI was scheduled to be closed, TMI-1, and at 3 Mile Island. And so essentially I stopped a couple hours later. I stopped for the night. After the phone call to Perry Village, I left my phone number. I said, hey, if you guys need to get a hold of me, you have any questions, if you're concerns, you're free to call me at any time. Now, any journalist can contact North Perry Village, the chief of police, and he will absolutely confirm that I made that phone call. I told them where I was, provided them with access to my location, told them my travel plans, told them exactly what I was doing, and gave them my phone number. A couple hours later, something happened, a snafu. There was a shift change. And so an officer came on and he wasn't given the memo about the power plant because they had already determined it to be a hoax to begin with. Peter John Ross stated in his interview that it was his own friend that made the phone calls that alerted North Perry to begin with. And so you have to remember that Peter John Ross basically states in an interview that he himself and someone associated with him started this by placing the calls to North Perry. Scumbag.com, again, another organization which I had heard of because I'm from Northeast Ohio, but it's not a news site. It's not anything credible. It is a user-generated rumor mill site that exposes people that have herpes and publishes people's prostitution arrests. And there's nothing credible, reputable. There's nothing, even the website itself says this is all user-submitted content. Now, later when I spoke with the people from scumbag.com, they stated they did not even write the North Perry article and that it was submitted to them by a party. And they said that they couldn't be sued because they were just a third-party content aggregator and that they knew who submitted the article. Well, I think it's pretty clear who submitted the article to begin with. And so then later, of course, I'm eating dinner and I'm at a diner. It's like 2 a.m. or something like that. And suddenly the police who have been sitting next to me all night get an APB for a Matthew Burdick who's driving a white Land Rover, et cetera, et cetera. They run out of the restaurant, then realize my white Land Rover is in the parking lot, run back into the restaurant. They get on the phone with the officer at North Perry. He tells them there's a maniacal, crazy madman hell-bent on that is headed towards his power plant and is going to blow it up and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, remember, these officers are standing right next to me. There's 4 officers in this town. Now, again, the officers that were part of this incident have agreed on numerous occasions to make statements to any media or any journalist to talk about what happened that night and that I was not maniacal or crazy. I was not running around, and that the officer himself that called them was sort of out of his mind. And that was exactly, the cop walked back to me and said, that guy is completely crazy. That was the first thing that was said to me by the officer that called. Now, later when I spoke to the North Perry Village police chief about this, he told me, well, he was half asleep when he got the call. He fell for it. He pinged your cell phone under U.S. law, which allows us to ping cell phones if there is a mental health emergency. That's how you were located in the town by there. That's why the APB was issued there for you. But obviously the officers that intervened determined it to be a hoax right away. North Perry Village realized that it had already been notified, but they conducted an investigation and they learned that a burner phone that was registered in Akron, Ohio had made the calls and made the false reports. Now, Peter later said in a podcast interview that it was his friend in Akron, who's a private investigator, who contacted him, who made those calls. And so Peter also makes commentary about, well, they said we already have his device IDs and his cell tower locations and all of these things, but that's kind of a bizarre statement because he then goes on to say they couldn't obtain a subpoena to get the information from Google, so they didn't in fact have all of that data. And then Peter goes on to complain, well, he accused me of a crime and it said blah, 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 and I had to go to the FBI. Well, that's because nobody would have ever investigated anything, or there would have been no phone calls to Peter. There would have been no public requests. There would have been nothing if it wasn't Peter and his friends themselves that submitted the article to scumbag.com, which is what scumbag.com has stated. And if Peter's friend wouldn't have made the calls in North Perry. So they self-generated this entire incident. And I just got sucked into it. And so the reason I believe, and again, this is my First Amendment protected opinion. I have been publicly accused of this massive thing, and I was obviously exonerated when they declined to press charges, or if there was even an investigation, because we don't have any evidence that an investigation actually occurred. We have the word of Peter John Ross, a man who says that I have no job and that I never paid child support for my son. So when you look at his other statements for veracity, you say, is this an honest man? Can we trust him? No, he's a pathological liar. But my First Amendment protected opinion about what happened here is I think that they didn't have the movie anything that was strong enough to be a big expose in the movie. And I think they took advantage of the fact that I was already traveling to nuclear facilities. They knew I was headed east, and I think they automatically assumed that either I was heading towards North Perry, that would be the next logical destination on my journey, because they knew that was one of the power plants that was closing down and it was part of my work on Yucca Mountain and the closure of these power plants and what to do with these fuel rods. I think they just picked North Perry. But the other thing is, I also think that it would have cost Peter John Ross too much money to drive 800 miles back to Missouri, shoot film at another power plant. And I also think that the image of the power plant on the lake is just a better image. And I think that they picked North Perry as a geographic location that was better suited for filming. I think it was more cost effective for production of the documentary to use a random nuclear power plant than in Ohio, so that Peter just has to drive, 100 miles to get the shots and drive back. Now, when you watch the movie, there's something very interesting. North Perry Chief is not in the movie. No FBI appears in the movie. No evidence, any documents. No, nothing appears in this movie other than this scumbag.com article, which scumbag.com itself stated was submitted by somebody associated with Peter John Ross in the first place. And so for years, I've been accused of this thing. He goes in there and says, well, the U.S. attorney said that old ladies don't understand IP addresses. That's bullshit. First of all, the issue here is that these FBI offices regularly use the subject of IP addresses and know how to explain them to juries or even a judge. So an IP address is like your home address. It's the location of your computer. So the address on your house is just like an IP address. It's that fast to explain an IP address. And this has been explained in previous court cases by this very same U.S. attorney who knows how to explain these things. And so then we're only left with this web of emails and where they came from and who sent them and what was going on throughout all of that. And honestly, did someone hack my Gmail account? Did someone, was there some nefarious activity? Did I have a root level, program on my cell phone that was placed there by somebody? Was there... Now, I later presented Vicky Angelopoulos, a cell phone expert for the Ohio Attorney General. I offered her to look at my devices, to hand her my phone, my laptop, to allow them to do a forensic investigation of my devices and my accounts and for them to determine what was going on during that period of time. And she didn't do it. They wouldn't look into it. And so I have been forthcoming at every step of this way that has happened here. The moment the article was published, I reasonably contacted the police, gave them my number, told them where I was, etc., etc., etc. I offered my devices, my laptop to Vicky Angelopoulos. Nobody asked for it. Nobody would look at it. I mean, I went out of my way to attempt to create an investigation myself to exonerate myself from these allegations because I knew, Peter's a liar. You have to understand, he is a compulsive, pathological liar. Listen to his interviews. Is Peter John Ross an honest man? That's a very simple question. Did I give money to my children? Absolutely. The year that he said that, as a matter of fact, I had just given $8,000 to my son. I paid child support for him for his whole life. Can I show an email which I attempted to offer my daughter's mom money for my daughter and Peter was included because I got tired of him accusing me of that? Absolutely. And Vicky Angelopoulos was also included in that email. And there was a witness at the Ohio Attorney General's office that I was, in fact, offering my daughter's mom money. And she just won't take it from me. Is Peter John Ross an honest man? He has no job. Now, you can scroll down my Twitter account and you can see my handyman business that I run. Is Peter John Ross an honest man? Adult Swim wasn't nice to him. They told him his work sucks. They tore him apart. The emails are published on Peter's own page showing that never happened. So what we have is a man who just lies. And so if those three things are lies, why would you count on everything else he says to be true, when he even will lie about such inconsequential things? Why would it matter if I have a job or if I paid child support to my kids in the first place? Like, why is that even relevant to any of the allegations he's making about me? Like, why would you make that up? That's my thing. Why would he lie about such trivial things that ultimately have no bearing on the story and don't really serve any purpose to further the narrative? And so why would he lie about that? And so you think he wouldn't lie about something much bigger? You think he wouldn't manufacture fake screenshots? You think this guy wouldn't do everything in his power to try to destroy me with false information? I can show you that the screenshots that he used in that movie, I have copies of originals that were posted several years ago before the movie was made, and I can show you that they photoshopped the Daily Independent Journal logo onto generic Facebook messages. I still have this evidence. I can show you the ways that they photoshopped and edited and did various things to sections of this film. I can show you how Peter John Ross says in the narrative he made violent threats to Daily Independent or to News Press Now. And then when you stop the film on that moment, it says he has not made any violent threats. I can show you that how he even lies in the narrative while there's evidence on the screen which discredits him. No one knows if the man was assaulting the woman. And then you stop the movie and Rachel, I feel so bad that I couldn't help that woman, but the police didn't show up, essentially confirming my entire story. So can we trust Peter John Ross as an honest man? No. And when you look, a year later, there was another incident in North Perry. Do you see all that media? Do you see how it made the media? Do you see how the FBI tweeted about it? Do you see how it became a public incident very quickly? Do you notice that in my case, it didn't become a public incident? That's not because I'm some powerful guy. It's not because I'm the founder of ToxicWasteSites.org. It's not because I'm some invincible person with special powers that's protected by some shadowy government agency. There's nothing else to the story other than the fact that it just didn't happen. And that Peter John Ross himself, by his own admission, and his friend, and according to scumbag.com, they created the entire incident. As for the allegation, it's patently ludicrous. Do you think I'm a demolitions expert? Do you think how do you blow up a nuclear power plant? Somebody tell me that. Like, how is that even possible? Like, you're saying that I somehow have some explosives experience. I know how to wire the stacks to make them fall down. And then they even use a term in the movie, which isn't even it's called, they say blast radius. There is no such thing as a blast radius for a nuclear power plant. There is an exposure radius. There's a leak radius. There is no such thing as a blast radius because nuclear power plants don't explode. So Peter's even got the technical terminology wrong. And that in of itself is one of the most interesting concepts involved in understanding that Peter may have faked this entire series of events just to have something for a movie, is the bizarre technical inaccuracy of the allegations themselves. Now, obviously, I know that you can't really blow up a nuclear power plant. I know that the reaction in a nuclear power plant is different than that of a reaction in a nuclear bomb, and that a nuclear power plant can't explode into a mushroom cloud like a nuclear bomb can. I know that, even in the event of an incident where something were to happen, the control rods would cause an automatic discharge of the current operating rods would dump into coolant. It would stop the chain reaction. I know extraordinary amount of things about power plants. I know there's a court ruling dated August 19th, which talks about the years that I studied physics. So I know what the fuck I'm talking about when it comes to nuclear power plants, especially the way they operate. And this is because this is a field of expertise that I pursued in my education. And so just the very, one of the things that suggests that Peter created this entire hoax or made all of this up or did something or pulled some nefarious scheme is just the glaring scientific mumbo jumbo that was used in the capacity of trying to create these bogus threats. And the fact that I know better and that it wouldn't be likely that I would start spouting this ridiculous non-scientific or pseudo-scientific jumbled garbage to attempt to do what? For what reason? What reason? Why? Why would I do that? That's just the next question. So then, when we're talking about North Perry, we're talking about a situation where journalists could get involved and they could get to the bottom of this. We're talking about a situation that really probably should have been covered by media because it was a hoax. Then Peter wouldn't be able to make his movie claiming it was claiming that it happened. But we have media suppression going on of various subjects involving me in Northeast Ohio, which is more related to the fact that I made poison in the grapes and exposed the Beacon Journal and local media outlets for covering up Superfund, the Superfund site in my neighborhood, the toxic waste site, and not watchdogging and doing these, fluff pieces about it, reprinting the government narrative. And at the end of the day, when you hear Peter John Ross go on to a podcast and he claims they had his license plate number and they were able to track him via traffic cameras and figure out his location that way, the North Perry police will tell you that's not what happened. And unfortunately, no journalist has gotten involved and asked for a statement from them, which would immediately resolve the matter. And you'll notice the production itself has not presented any statement from that town at all. And I'll tell you in closing one thing that happened. This was an interesting conversation between myself and the chief of the North Perry Police. So when this incident occurred, years passed before Peter announced his trailer and released his trailer. And then it became a subject matter. And at that point, I got on the phone with the chief of North Perry and I said, do you know about this movie? Because Peter had released all this footage of North Perry. And the chief said, oh, wow, this was just filmed the other day. Look at the foliage and it matches he must have just did this the other day. I said, did you? And Peter had posted publicly that he interviewed the chief of North Perry. I saved that. So for years, he was bragging that his movie was going to feature an interview with the chief of North Perry. And I have the screenshots where he publicly stated that. Well, when I talked to the chief, he said, I would never. He said, your dad was a cop. He's like, do you think I would willingly publicly get involved in something like this and launch an attack on a guy where we already determined it to be a hoax in the first place? He's like, I don't want anything to do with this. He's like, we have enough responsibility as it is guarding this nuclear power plant. We've got all kinds of drama with it closing down. And he said, but when the time comes, when the media contacts me, we will be honest. We will let them know that we fucked up. And I said, so Peter never spoke to you? Nope, I've never talked to that man. I've never heard from him. I've never said a word to him. He snuck into town. He snuck out of town. I said, well, that's kind of suspect, isn't it? Well, of course it is. And so he told me, he was very straight up. He said, we're not crooks. He said, we'll admit to our mistakes. And so when it comes time and this becomes a public issue, we will absolutely willingly admit that our officer made a mistake and that it was a hoax. And it was absolutely a hoax that was 100% orchestrated by Peter John Ross just for his movie. And the actual series of events could easily be confirmed. But as we all know, Peter John Ross is too much of a pussy to call an unbiased third-party journalist. He won't have the film vetted. He won't reach out to journalists that don't have anything to do with the production and say, here, vet this. He won't do it. He refused. Absolutely will not make any effort to vet the film. He won't. His excuse was, well, the film's not out. Why would the media want to vet the film if it's not even released and no one can watch it? And then he just goes on 4, 5, 6 podcasts and starts doing interviews about the film that's not released, thus negating the statement in his own video. Peter John Ross, can he be trusted? Is he an honest man? The answer is no. Period.